when you let go of some of that grasping around how things need to be or have to be, the way things want to be, as they desire to be, will come into being. Hello and welcome to Remember Why You're Here, a podcast for seekers and sensitives where you can relax, receive, reconnect to your own self, and remember the most important thing of all, why you're here. I'm Asia Suler, author, teacher, earth intuitive, and in this episode, we're going to talk about surviving soul-forging times. We'll discuss what exactly a soul-forging time is, why it's important for us, how we're living through one right now on Earth, and how to survive it. And not only survive it, but thrive through having experienced it. So this episode feels very dear and important to me right now in my life. And I think it's one we're all feeling in this moment now here on Earth. It first came through for me when I was living through and surviving Hurricane Helene here in the mountains in western North Carolina this past fall. And I had this kind of front row seat through that experience of what it is like to live through an epic natural disaster, what it is like to be disconnected from all the things that normally make your life possible. Things like running water, electricity, cell service, gas, roads going in and out of where I live. Every major highway except for one was destroyed or closed. And so I had this really pretty intense, powerful, soul-forging experience. And what I have found moving through this is it's given me this fodder, this roadmap, and this way to talk about these experiences that can really help as we move collectively through what I see to be a soul-forging time. And this is something I talked about a lot in my reading for 2024. When I did my intuitive reading for this year, that this was going to be a year of soul forging on a collective level. And so I think this information and this roadmap is really important at this time. And the cool thing about it is, as intense as it is to be forged, it also means that we are coming into our power in a completely new way, that you are reconnecting to yourself, your mission, your soul in a way you probably have not experienced yet on this planet. And that's a good thing. So what do I mean when I talk about soul forging? Well, I'm not a blacksmith, but my understanding of forging is that there is an intense alchemy that happens when you forge something. I mean, think of any time you've ever seen someone work metal, whether in person or if you've watched a video. They're taking this piece of metal, heating it up, shaping it, rolling it, pressing it, changing its shape completely. Its essential self remains the same, and yet it's being forged into something different, being forged into decoration, being forged into weaponry, being forged into utensil, being forged into something other than it knew itself to be. So in this way, a forging time, a soul forging time is like moving into the fire. It's like going directly into the fire and the heat of an experience in order to be transformed and changed. Sometimes we choose soul forging times on purpose, but what I found more often is that we don't choose them. They tend to just happen to us. So you might be in a moment right now where you are in a soul forging time, but if not, I'm sure you can remember one. Times where it felt like you were being cooked, where everything that held your life together in a certain way, your whole structure of reality started to shift and change beneath you. This could be a loss of a relationship. This could be a shift in your health, your well-being, loss of a home, radical change in any way, shape, or capacity, birth of a child, all of these are soul forging experiences that bring our essential element, like the metal of who we are, to the surface. And I think that there is an essential importance to this kind of soul forging, that we come here to this planet planning for and knowing that we are going to experience these times, and that these times are important because they help to reshape us. They help to mold us once again back into the shape of our destiny, to realize the shape of our destiny once more. So let's talk a little bit about how to know if you are in the midst of a soul forging time right now in your life. And I prefer this term over something like a very hard time or a dark night of the soul. And it might be all those things too. But it's helpful to have this framework of I'm in the midst of a soul forging time. It gives it like this very heroic element to it, like you're on your own Lord of the Rings type mission at this time in your life. But how do you know? Like, how do you know that you're in the middle of one right now? So here are some signs. 1, you don't know what's going on. And I say this with so much love in my heart because Lord knows I've been there a lot. But it's this sense or this feeling like, what is actually going on right now? Like, I don't have the template for this. I have not lived through this specific kind of thing before. Some aspect of this feels very new to me, very unsure. Like, it might even be in a specific way in your life. You're like, what is going on a day-to-day basis in my life? Like, I have never seen this kind of thing happen in this kind of way. My routines are all out of whack. If you have this feeling sense of like, I do not know what's going on, then you're probably living through a soul forging time. Number 2 is it's really hard to directly envision your future. I am a very future-oriented person. I love daydreaming about the future. I love having plans, visions, goals. When I am living through a soul-forging time, it's like all that drops away and I can no longer envision my future. It's very scary to a part of my brain and my psyche that absolutely loves that, loves holding that vision, loves working towards that vision. But there's also a piece here where we need to be willing to even let go of the reaching for that visioning of the future. And here's why. It's because the future is changing in this very moment. In soul forging moments, your future is being redefined. Now, I think we all come here for a reason. That's literally why I named my podcast, Remember Why You're Here. It's to remember, right? Like those things that drive us, that brought us here, that we're passionate about, that we're here to give to this planet. And nothing is set in stone in terms of how that's going to manifest or how exactly you're going to evolve. And so when you're in a soul forging time, it's almost as if this wider aspect of you, and if you've been following me for a while, you know that I really like the term wider self rather than higher self, because for me, my higher self is something I'm a part of. It's this wider energy and awareness that I belong to. And so our wider self is always holding this vision, right? But here in the vessel of our bodies, we can often forget, right? Or we grow accustomed to a certain shape or way of being in the world, and we only take up that space. Well, when we're in a soul forging time, it's like we're reforging the container of who we are so that our soul can sit in it in a different way, so that our soul itself is actually enriched and changed by the experience of being here. Like that our soul is able to receive the learning and the knowing and the growth that it yearned for, that it desired in coming here to this planet. And so in this way, it is almost essential, actually, that you let go of this visioning of the future, this vision of what's to come, because it's changing. And in fact, it's probably going to take on a new and more radical shape than you ever could have imagined from where you were previously. It's like your ability to even hold that awareness and that imagining of your future is growing in its capacity. The vessel of your imagination is growing in its capacity. So If you're in a soul forging moment and you can no longer glimpse your future, know that that's a positive thing. That's helpful. Let it go. Because on the other side, so much clarity is going to stream in. And the third sign that you might be in a soul forging time is that certainty is in flux. There are things in my life that I'm certain about, right? And some of those things are eternal, right? Like, I am certain that this earth loves us and that I'm here for a reason. I'm certain that I love my child. I'm certain that it's a gift to be on this planet. Those are some of my certainties. But what happens during a soul forging time is that some of these certainties are a little less eternal, but nonetheless were things you were pretty certain about before, suddenly are no longer certain. Suddenly these things that were kind of like the bedrock of your existence that you planned around, that you mapped the whole world out within, are no longer certain. Like, the map itself has changed. And this happens pretty organically when you have a big change come up during a soul forging time. If you've had a big loss or a dramatic shift, it's like that map of certainty, that bedrock has changed beneath you. And it is terrifying. It's terrifying to have the things that you were so certain about, whether it was, the land where you live, your town, your loved ones, your job, like these things that you almost didn't even have to think about, right? When that certainty is in flux, it's almost like you are set free to imagine something different. And I say this with so much love and compassion in my heart, because losing those certainties can be absolutely heartbreaking. Like through the hurricane, losing my apothecary, losing our entire town, that's heartbreaking in a way that doesn't change. Even as I know this is a absolute soul forging time where more of me is now coming to this planet and my mission is even that much clearer. And yet when certainties are in flux, it opens up our perception. It gives us the ability to widen our field of vision and our field of knowing. It's really normal and natural as human beings to want to have a certain field of our knowing, to have the things that we know are certain. And there's a reason for this. When we're certain about something, we don't have to think about it anymore. That's helpful. There's a lot of things to think about. And so when you're certain about something, there's a part of you that goes, okay, that stone is right there. I don't have to think about it anymore because I know it's right there. But what happens when that stone tumbles down? You have to rethink everything. You have to rethink the whole map of your existence. So if you're in a soul forging time, likely the things that you were certain about aren't feeling so certain anymore. And that can be a really challenging experience. But what I want you to think about is that certainty, like being that standing stone, or perhaps like being a tree in the forest. This old tree that you thought, there's no way this tree could ever fall. And then it does. And it's shocking and it's hard. And on the other side of that shift, a space opens up in the canopy. The ground is revealed. New seeds can take root. You view your landscape differently. And not only are you viewing it differently, you're seeing it. This is the thing about the things that we're certain about. Studies have shown that when we kind of have something categorized as certain in our brain, we literally stop seeing it. We stop noticing it. We stop perceiving it. So when certainties in our life change, it opens up our field of perception. It's sort of this semi-psychedelic awareness that gets opened up where you're actually seeing your life again with fresh eyes. You're seeing your world again with fresh eyes, your relationships, your career, your path in life. All these things now have the ability to be seen with fresh eyes. And that's valuable. That's so valuable. And it doesn't negate the pain, right? Like I walk around here in the mountains where I live, and some hillsides, every single tree, it feels, has been broken in half like a matchstick. The land here looks completely different. Things I never thought would change. Streams, creeks that became raging rivers that entirely and completely changed the geological history of that place, that valley. Nevertheless, it has revealed this layer of existence that I didn't see before. It has literally unearthed rocks that may have never been held by a human hand or seen by human eyes. And it's powerful to have those maps change. And that power and that opening of new perspective gives us the potential to come once again back into ourselves with an expanded perspective, to let ourselves be forged by the fire of what we're experiencing so that we can be an even wider container for our own soul and our own being. So you might, after listening to this, be saying to yourself, I am in a soul forging time. Or maybe you're thinking, oh gosh, I really remember that time in my life. I know what it's like to live through that. Or maybe you're even in a place of being like, yeah, where there's a world right now, we are there. And if you're in that place, I'm going to tell you I'm in that place with you. So this is pertinent information for wherever you are. But the next piece I want to share is like, what do you do? What do you do in those soul forging moments? Because it is so confusing and hard, and you feel untethered in this way, and it can be scary. Like, what do you do in these soul forging times, these times that look so dire and so drastic, but are literally actually reshaping the container of physical reality, including the container of your own self, so that more can be held, so that your soul is literally enriched and grows through this experience? This is like the stuff, this is the stuff that your soul came here for. But what do you do? Like on a very real human level, what do you do during these times? Well, the first thing I would suggest is to look for handholds of meaning. That's what I call them, handholds of meaning. And these are not the new vistas that you're going to get to and look out of and be like, I have it all figured out. No, this is like you scaling a wall and you just find one handhold after another. That is all that's being asked of you right now. You don't need to see the whole future. You don't need to see 10 steps ahead, just the next step. Find that next handhold of meaning where you can continue to hold on, because there's this level on which that's all that's really being asked of you during a soul forging time is just to hold on. The alchemy is already happening within you. The alchemy is already taking place. You don't need to do any special kind of ritual. Like, you don't need to set up an altar in order for it to happen. It is happening. And your job is just to hold on while it is happening. It is literally like a weather event that you are experiencing, and your job is to hold on. So looking for handholds of meaning, are there moments where you felt affirmed or had a tiny, tiny little bit of clarity? Or are there, things that you can see and understand that help make sense of what happened to you that morning? You don't have to understand the big picture here, but just those tiny little handholds of meaning. Feel free to revisit things in life that have been helpful. Or, if you do find something, write it down. Like, it can be really helpful to keep a journal at this time. And at the end of the day, just write down whatever that little handhold of meaning was. Write it down, because the thing is, it feels little, right? Like this tiny little shift, and you're like, okay, I have a new handhold. I can hold on just a little bit longer. But one handhold after another is what gets us right to the top of the mountain. It's what gets us to that vista. So know that it's really okay to not have the full picture right now, to just have a handhold of meaning and to find the next one when it comes. Another important thing that can help you through this time is to remember that nothing is ever exactly as you think it's going to be. Like, whatever you imagine The future is going to be, it won't be exactly that. And that is a positive thing. So have you noticed this? When we have a vision of the future, right, no matter what that vision is, whether it's positive or negative, it's never like exactly like that. Even if you're very clairvoyant, even if you have these super like crystal clear images sometimes come in for you of the future or really strong feelings, it's never like exactly like that, right? Like there may be elements that are even more delightful than you could have imagined, or elements that are more challenging, or it's just not better or worse. It's just slightly different. And this is a very positive thing. So here's why. We as humans have this negativity bias, right? We tend to focus on what's negative because we're trying to protect ourselves and make sure hard things don't happen. But then what does end up happening is we often can have sort of a slightly negative bent to what we imagine will happen in the future, this sort of catastrophizing. So if you are catastrophizing in any way, and during soul forging times, one thing I do find is that we tend to go into this place of despair where we say to ourselves, A, X, Y, or Z are going to happen, or B, like, I'm never going to feel excited again. I'm never going to feel enlivened again. I'm never going to have direction again. Everything that I have been building is just going to fall apart like a pancake on itself. So when you catch yourself in those cycles, like remind yourself, nothing is ever exactly as you imagined it was going to be, for better or worse. And that should feel like this sort of freeing trickster energy. It's such a trickster energy at play in this world that even the most specifically clairvoyant of us all will never have the full picture of what the future holds. And that's on purpose, partially, right? Because the future is being written now. But it's so helpful to remember when you get into these despair cycles of thinking, I will never get out of this, or things are inevitably going to be bad, or I'm losing everything that I've built, to remind yourself like, nothing's ever exactly as I thought it was going to be, as I think it's going to be. And that's positive, right? It leaves space for this, the beauty of the mystery, the beauty of the potential to come in. And there's so much beauty and so much potential that's ready to come in for you. And when you let go of some of that grasping around how things need to be or have to be, the way things want to be, as they desire to be, will come into being. So remind yourself of this. It's also really helpful, especially when going through the hard aspects of soul forging times, to remember that the earth loves you, this planet loves you, the unseen elements that are manufacturing and co-creating and bringing this precipice into view, that they're loving forces. That the general force behind the world is one of love and benevolence and care, and that in fact, you are so loved and your growth is so important to the overall development of this world, to the evolution and healing of this world, that the message that you need to grow will never stop being delivered. It will never stop being delivered. And this can feel hard sometimes, like, why am I at this healing precipice again? I'm dealing with this issue once more. Here I am, in the cul-de-sac of whatever the thing is that comes up again and again. But to remember that this is a message. This is a message coming from your own wider self, from the heart of the world. And it's a message that keeps coming because you are that loved. Your evolution and growth is that important that you're not going to be let off the hook without stepping into it. That the forces that care for your evolution and growth will continue to come, to make themselves manifest, to send these messages, these opportunities to grow, to grow, to grow. Your growth is that important. Like what you came here to give is that vital. It's that necessary. So you are not being punished, even though I know sometimes it can really feel like that, but you are not being punished by the challenges that are coming up, by, especially when they're repetitive, patterns, issues, challenges that just seem to just cycle in your life. It's a message that is once again being delivered because the heart of the world is saying to you, you will not be left behind. You will not be left behind. Not in this lifetime. Like, you are here to continue to blossom and unfurl. You're here to give your gifts. You're here to live into your potential. And this world loves you so much. There's no way that it's going to leave you behind. And that is why this is coming up again. Now, saying all of this, the reality is also that soul forging times can be hard on our bodies, on our soma. There's literally a part of our bodies that is going to be saying, this is not okay with me. This is hard. This is stressful. I like certainty. I like safety. I like knowing that the way things are going to be. And so it can be really helpful to have somatic tools to be a companion to your body in this time. Even if there's a part of our psyches, our wider spirits that know, yes, this is for the greater good of my unfurling, that I am becoming this vessel where I can hold more and more of who I am. The animal of our bodies needs support during this time. Shock, trauma, these are very real aspects of living through, especially a soul forging time that's very shocking. And it kind of tends to be shocking soul forging times. There's normally an element of it where we are deeply surprised by what has taken place. We didn't see this coming. And so having somatic tools to be a companion to your body, to help your body and your nervous system as you move through this time, can be really important. So one of the first most basic things that you could do is to shake. So literally to just shake your body, whether you are dancing and shaking it out, or whether you're just letting your whole body shake with emotion, shake when you're crying. You could lay on a vibrating board, you could twerk, you could do a shimmy, whatever helps you shake. Shaking is a very primal somatic response to stress and shock. And oftentimes, if we don't let ourselves shake, that the energy of that shock can live in our body still and become trauma. So letting ourselves shake, maybe having a daily shaking practice, can be really helpful in letting go of some of this stored charge. And when we have stored charge, our body will continue to try and complete the cycle. Whatever that cycle is, to try and complete it so that the charge can be released. And so sometimes this can look like manifesting more issues. It can look like, recapitulating a trauma. And so if it feels like you're kind of in this space where you can't get a break, one thing you can do is try literally giving your body a break by shaking, because this really helps to integrate and release the charge that we're carrying. So even in this moment, you could try shaking your hands and just notice as you shake your hands, if you have the ability to do so, that even just a little bit of that energy can be released. And that's super duper helpful. I noticed when I was living through the hurricane, the first time I went to the apothecary, and that was an entire experience unto itself. It was dangerous and very hard physically and emotionally. When I came home, my whole body shook like a leaf for hours. And it was really important that I let that go. Right? It's super important that I let that happen when it was arising. And I made a practice of continuing to shake in the days after and even the months after. So that's one tool. Another tool is called a butterfly hug. And so this is pretty simple. You take your two hands, you cross them over your chest so that your thumbs meet, and then you intertwine your thumbs, and then you lay both hands sort of opposite of one another on your chest. So you'd have your right hand on the left side of your chest, your left hand on the right side of your chest, and you can keep your thumbs intertwined here, or if that doesn't feel comfortable, just have your hands sort of crossed over your chest. And then you alternate tapping on one side of your chest versus another. This somatic technique was literally developed in the aftermath of a natural disaster to help people survive moments of big upheaval and change. But it's really this bilateral stimulation is super helpful for regulating our nervous system, for coming back into this settled state of being in our nervous system. So you can do this for 30 seconds, a minute, even longer, and just see how long it takes until you just reach this sense of settledness again. Like nothing's fixed, right? But you're settled again. There's a sense of being able to touch your center. And the last practice I want to hand to you is called comfort object eye gazing. And this is also a somatic tool where you find something in your environment that is very comforting for you to look at, and you let your gaze rest there. So the first thing you're going to do is actually literally move your neck around in a circle, like not a specific circle, but just let your neck move in all directions. So you look to the left, you look to the right, like you really let your head move up and down and all around. And this movement of our neck is signaling to our nervous system that we are safe, right? When we're in a high stakes moment, we're going to want to be looking straight ahead. We're focused like a laser beam. So when you move, you specifically intentionally move your neck around, it is signaling to your nervous system, oh, we must be safe enough to look around us. So really look all around the space that you're in. And then once you've really taken a good look all around, letting your eyes move too, your head, your neck, and your eyes, then find an object, something that you can rest your gaze on that is comforting. So when I first returned from making my way to the apothecary, hiking onto the island, I was in a pretty big state of shock after that experience. And I was sitting in the grass of this farm. We didn't have running water at the time still. And so we went to a farm where they did have running water to take a shower because I was covered head to toe in this toxic sludge. Wasn't fully geared up or prepared for the reality of what that was going to be like. And I could feel that I was literally living outside of my body. Like I was not inside of my body. I was so in shock. But I remembered these tools, like I remembered them. And so I did this. I looked all around and ended up letting my gaze fall on this trellis of tomatoes that they had, and was looking at the tomatoes and all the different stages of growth. And it was really amazing to notice that just this simple motion of first looking around and then letting myself really be comforted, really letting myself be comforted by something in my field did a lot to help myself come back in. And I did all the things. I was shaking on purpose. I was looking around. I did the butterfly hug. And it was actually life-changing to witness how my soul came back into my body. And this is something that's really important, and another big reason why I bring up somatic exercises in particular is because in order for a soul forging time to actually forge our soul needs to be present. And it makes sense, right? When we're going through a really, really hard time or something traumatic, something shocking, that part of us flees, is like, I'm not going to be here anymore. That's like by design. It's important. It helps keep our souls and our psyches intact to dissociate in that way. And yet in order for like the integration to happen on the other side, for the evolution, the growth, the potential to come in, we need to bring our souls back in to our bodies, back into the vessels, in order for our soul to then both forge us in their next evolution and be forged as we grow and evolve and change. So these are just 3 somatic exercises that I find to be really helpful, that will really bring you back into your body so that your soul can do its work. Your soul can be changed from what you've experienced, that you can evolve more into this wider receptacle, this wider vessel that you are meant to be. And lastly, I find it super helpful if you're in the middle of a soul forging time to remember other soul forging times in your life. To remember how you were in the midst of it. When you were in the midst of it, you had no idea how you were going to survive this. It felt like everything had changed, everything was up in the air, and yet you did. right? And so they can give us templates. They can give us handholds of meaning to look back and see, oh, I had no idea what was being forged in that time, but I would not be the person I am today without that experience. So much so that maybe even a part of you is grateful that it happened, right? So look back to those times because they will help to guide you for the times ahead, and to know that as much as we're living in a time where everyone keeps calling it unprecedented times, there's this level in which it's not, right? There's this level in which everything under the sun has happened before in one iteration or another. And so when you look at a collective level and you start to feel like the world is going to hell in a handbasket, you can remember that human beings have lived through so many cycles of cataclysm and change. We have gone through great bottlenecks in which our species almost completely died out. We have seen empires rise and fall. We've seen the worst of humanity and the best of humanity. We have lived through it all. Our ancestors have lived through it all. So as we walk into this time, this year of 2025, this year that I had called in my reading a soul forging year, remember that you have the tools to live through this. Your ancestors lived through every imaginable iteration of change, cataclysm, upheaval. Like as humans, we were designed to actually withstand this, to move through this, to be forged by it so that we can continue to bring the invaluable gifts that we carry as a species and as individuals to this planet. I don't think any soul forging times happen by accident. They are opportunities that the earth is helping to bring into being, that we are part of co-creating, because the deepest part of us, the widest part of us, wants to grow, wants to evolve, wants to be forged by this experience of living here on this planet. Because there's a freedom in it. There's a freedom in evolving into who you always knew you were meant to be. And what's really cool and kind of radical about living through hard times, living through soul forging times, is that your mission can get super clear. All the stuff that isn't for you anymore, that you don't need to worry about anymore, you don't need to handle, you don't even need to pay attention to, you don't need to read about, you don't need to watch. All that stuff gets really clear because you notice the way in which it takes you away from what's most important, the way it takes you away from like your heart's mission. Soul forging times make what is very important, collectively, but also personally to you, very, very clear. So embrace that gift of this time, whether you're personally in a very soul forging time or whether you just are experiencing the vast soul forging that we are in as this world. Know that things are being made clear for you in your own lives, for the collective. There is a deep and powerful clarity coming out of this time. And on the other side will be this new fashioning, this new forging, this new patterning that can hold even more potential than what we can currently imagine. So thank you for being here. Thank you for living through these soul forging times, for being willing to continue to be here. You're vital. You're really important for this moment in time. If you weren't important, you wouldn't be here. What you have to give, who you are, it's an essential part of this whole. And you being willing to be forged by your experiences and by what we're moving through collectively on this planet is a really important piece of the becoming that is at play in our world right now. So if you are loving this podcast so far, and I sincerely am hoping that you are, please leave me a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. This ask is a new one for me, as everything with this podcast, but I know it helps so much to increase the visibility of this podcast, to reach the people that this message is meant to reach, to help people remember why they are here. I read every review. They mean so much to me, and I'm really just so grateful and honored that I get to be in this collective with you, these sensitives and seekers who are really here to dedicate themselves to this one thing, right? Which is remembering why we're here. So thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time.